When I stepped out of the car, the first thing that hit me wasn't the mountain breeze, it was the sound of children laughing inside my house. Toys were scattered across the lawn, the front door was wide open, and someone's beat-up minivan was parked where my Lexus should have been. For a second I thought maybe I was dreaming. But the smell of fried food and cheap perfume drifting through my doorway snapped me back to reality. I wasn't dreaming, someone was living in my home. I gripped my phone, heart pounding, watching shadows move behind my curtains. When I finally knocked, the door swung open and there she was, Lydia Whitmore, the neighborhood's self-appointed queen of complaints, better known as Karen. Her glare could cut glass. And when I told her I owned this house, she laughed and called 911 on me. Before we dive into this wild story, comment below where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you love seeing karma catch up with people like Karen. Now let's rewind a bit. The police lights hadn't arrived yet, but the tension was already suffocating. I stood on my own porch, suitcase in hand, staring into the sharp, judgmental eyes of the woman everyone in Maple Creek called Karen. Her real name was Lydia Whitmore, but around the HOA, that name had become shorthand for chaos, late-night complaint emails, lawn measurement disputes, and her legendary meltdown over someone hanging a Halloween skeleton too early in October. And now somehow she was living in my house. "I think you're mistaken," I said, keeping my voice calm. My pulse, however, was anything but. "This is my home. I have the title deed, my mail, my name on every utility bill." Lydia cut me off with a sharp scoff. "Nice try. We've been here for 3 weeks. We have rights." I blinked. "Rights. Tenant rights," she said confidently, folding her arms like she was giving a lecture on the Constitution she'd never read. "You can't just walk in and threaten us. You'll need to go through eviction court if you want us out." Behind her I could see a teenage boy lounging on my sofa eating cereal straight from the box. A little girl ran by holding my golden retriever's chew toy. And from deeper in the house came the sound of a man's voice yelling, "Honey, we're out of beer." I felt my stomach drop. "I don't know what kind of scam this is," I said, stepping forward, "but this is breaking and entering. You need to leave now." Before I could finish, Lydia whipped out her phone, her voice shooting up to a shriek that could shatter glass. "Help, he's threatening me. There's a strange man at my door claiming he owns the place." I froze. My jaw clenched. The audacity was breathtaking. I'd spent 15 years building this home, overseeing every nail and tile, fighting HOA disputes to keep this neighborhood beautiful, and now I was the intruder. "You can't be serious," I said. She was. Her voice turned shrill as she relayed my crimes to the 911 operator pacing dramatically across my porch. Every word was a performance. "Yes, he's here now. Yes, he looks angry. No, I don't feel safe, lady," I snapped. "I'm the homeowner. You're trespassing." Her eyes lit up like I'd given her a Christmas present. "You hear that? He just admitted he's harassing me." I took a deep breath and forced myself to stay still. I wasn't about to give her anything she could twist. Instead, I lifted my phone and started recording. "For the record," I said steadily, "my name is Noah Carter, and this is my property at 218 Aspen Ridge Drive. The woman on camera has been living here illegally." That made her pause, just for a moment. But then she smirked that smug, self-righteous grin I'd seen at every HOA meeting she ever attended. "Good luck proving that," she said, and slammed the door in my face. The click of my own lock twisting shut from the inside sent a cold shock through me. I stood there on the doorstep of my own home, listening to strangers walk around inside, opening my refrigerator, laughing at something on my TV. It felt like a nightmare. You can't wake up from one where you scream, but nobody hears you. I looked around, hoping maybe a neighbor had noticed. Across the street, Mrs. Chen peeked through her blinds. To the right, the Garcias' teenage son stood in his driveway, phone in hand, filming. Great. This was going to be all over the neighborhood group chat within minutes. Minutes later, I heard the distant whoop of sirens. 2 police cruisers rolled slowly down Aspen Ridge and parked right in front of my driveway. Doors opened and 2 officers stepped out. Officer Alvarez, short and no nonsense, and Officer Green, tall, calm, the kind of guy who's seen everything twice. "Sir, what seems to be the problem?" Alvarez asked. "I just got back from vacation," I said, gesturing to my luggage. "That's my house. These people moved in without permission." Before Alvarez could respond, the front door swung open again, and Lydia emerged, instantly turning on the theatrics. "Officers, thank God. This man showed up out of nowhere, screaming at me and my children." "I didn't scream," I said, exasperated. "She's lying." A small voice in my head whispered, "Stay calm. Stay factual." "Ma'am," Officer Green said, "do you have any documents showing you live here?" "Of course," Lydia said confidently, and then paused. "Well, not on paper, but we have an agreement with the property manager. His name is Derek Mullins. We paid him $3,000 for the first month and deposit. Alvarez looked at me. Do you know a Derek Mullins? Never heard of him, I said, and there is no property manager. I own the house outright. Sir, do you have proof? Yes, I said already, scrolling through my phone. I pulled up my property tax records, digital deed insurance policy, and the smart home app showing my name linked to every device. Officer Alvarez nodded. Everything matches your ID. Lydia's tone turned sharp. That doesn't prove anything. Anyone can fake documents these days. How do we know he's not running some kind of scam? Green sighed. Ma'am, you're saying you've lived here 3 weeks? Yes. We cleaned up this place, maintained it, paid utilities I cut in. On my name, well, they were already on when we moved in, she said quickly. That did it. Alvarez closed her notebook with a snap. Ma'am, what you're describing isn't legal tenancy, it's trespassing. You'll need to vacate the premises immediately. Lydia's face turned red. This is discrimination. You're taking his side because you're all in on it. Officer Green's patience was thinning. Ma'am, this isn't about race or sides. This is about property law. From inside the house, a man's voice yelled, Lydia, what's going on? A large red-faced guy in a grease-stained tank top appeared behind her, Ron apparently. He was holding my bottle of single malt whiskey. I pointed. That's mine. Ron blinked, looked at the label, then shrugged. It was open. Put it down, sir, Alvarez said, already writing notes. Then came the kids, one boy, one girl, both wide-eyed, clutching toys that definitely belonged to my golden retriever. Then a gray-haired old man shuffled in wearing my bathrobe. I rubbed my temples. Unbelievable, Officer Green spoke carefully. Ma'am, everyone here needs to pack up and leave. Now, Lydia crossed her arms. You can't just throw us out. We're a family. We have nowhere else to go. That's not his responsibility, Alvarez said. This property isn't yours. For a moment it looked like Lydia might back down, but then her expression hardened. You'll regret this, she hissed at me. You'll see. I know people. Do any of them know how to read a deed? I muttered. Alvarez gave me a small warning look. Stay calm. I exhaled slowly. Under police supervision, the Whitmores began hauling their things outside suitcases, trash bags, a half-broken PlayStation, and more of my possessions than I wanted to admit. The kids whined. Ron complained. The old man muttered about ungrateful millennials. Lydia narrated the whole ordeal like she was the star of a tragic movie. By the time the police wrapped up their report, the sun was sinking behind the Colorado foothills. The street smelled like dust and tension. Officer Alvarez handed me her card. Mr. Carter, change your locks tonight. Take photos of everything. File an insurance claim for damages. We'll classify this as trespassing. I nodded, though my brain was still spinning. You think they'll come back? Green adjusted his cap. People like her always think they're the victims. So yes, maybe. But next time it won't end with a warning. As their cruisers drove away, the flashing lights faded into the darkening street. For the first time in hours, it was quiet again. I stepped back into my house. My once perfect living room looked like a garage sale hit by a hurricane. Crumbs covered the counter, soda stains marked the floor, and my leather couch had an imprint shaped suspiciously like Ron's gut, and yet, somehow I felt lucky. At least they were gone, or so I thought. Because as I turned off the porch light, I noticed something across the street, a silhouette sitting in the parked sedan that hadn't moved all evening. Even from here, I could see his smirk. It was Ron, still watching. And when my phone buzzed moments later with a text from an unknown number that read, "You made a big mistake, HOA boy," I realized the nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning. The next morning, I barely slept. Every creak of the house made my pulse spike. Even the sound of my coffee maker felt wrong, because it wasn't just about the mess they'd left behind. It was about what they'd taken from me, that feeling of safety inside my own walls. When the sun came up, I walked the perimeter of the house like a soldier on patrol. The back gate latch had been busted. The garage lock was mangled, looked like someone had pried it open with a crowbar. There were muddy footprints by the garden shed, and my security camera on the side door had been unplugged. They'd been smart enough to kill the power supply, but dumb enough to leave their fingerprints all over everything. I called my insurance agent first, then the locksmith, and then the HOA Vice President Margaret Vu, who lived 2 houses down. Her voice was a mix of sympathy and disbelief. Wait, Lydia Whitmore, Karen Whitmore. She moved into your house, lived in it, trashed it, and called the cops on me, I said flatly. Margaret groaned. I knew she'd snap one day, but she's been fighting Oak Terrace HOA for years, her own neighborhood. You know, she once accused her mailman of discrimination because he didn't wave fast enough. Yeah, I muttered. and now she's squatting in other people's homes. I thought maybe, just maybe, that was the end of it. But an hour later, my phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. Mr. Noah Carter, a smooth professional voice said. Yes, who's this? This is Bradford Pennington, attorney at law representing Mrs. Lydia Whitmore. I believe you had a disagreement yesterday. I blinked, momentarily speechless. You're telling me Karen found a lawyer in less than 12 hours. My client's name, he said stiffly, is Mrs. Whitmore, and she's informed me that she and her family were illegally evicted from the premises at 218 Aspen Ridge. I laughed, a tired, bitter laugh. You mean my house? That's in dispute, Pennington replied, clearly unbothered. Mrs. Whitmore asserts that she entered into a verbal rental agreement with a duly authorized representative of yours, a Mr. Derek Mullins. She paid first month's rent, and a deposit then was forcibly removed by law enforcement without due process. You've got to be kidding me, I said. There was no agreement. I don't even know who Derek Mullins is. Pennington sighed like a man humoring a difficult child. Do you have documentation proving Mr. Mullins wasn't acting on your behalf? Documentation proving a random scammer wasn't my property manager. No, I don't keep that on file next to my birth certificate. He ignored the sarcasm. My client is seeking damages, emotional distress, moving expenses, and discrimination under the Fair Housing Act. Discrimination, I said, stunned. She broke into my house, and I'm the one being accused of discrimination. Pennington's tone was almost smug. My client alleges that you targeted her family because of race and class. That you used your position as HOA president to have her unlawfully removed. There it was, the card. Every manipulative person like Lydia eventually played victimhood. You realize, I said slowly, that's a felony-level false accusation. I realize you're not taking this seriously, he said. We'll be filing suit if we don't hear from you within 48 hours. Then he hung up. I stood in my kitchen, staring at my phone, trying not to throw it through the window. They weren't just trespassers anymore. They were plotting. 5 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I half expected Lydia to be standing there waving a fake court order. Instead, it was a woman with a microphone and a cameraman. Mr. Carter Ashley Chang, Channel 7 News. You've got to be kidding me. How did you even... We're doing a story about a local family who claims they were illegally evicted by their HOA president, she said smoothly. Would you like to share your side? For a second, I almost slammed the door. But then I thought about it. Karen's version would paint me as some cold-hearted bureaucrat throwing innocent families out onto the street. I wasn't going to let her control the narrative, so I took a breath and stepped onto the porch. Sure, I said. I'll tell you exactly what happened. The camera started rolling. I came back from vacation to find strangers living in my house. They had no lease, no paperwork, nothing. The police confirmed they had no legal right to be there. That's not eviction. That's trespassing. Ashley looked at me carefully. But they say they were told by an agent of yours. They were told by a con artist, I cut in. And either they fell for it or they were part of it. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, a hint of surprise at how direct I was. Mrs. Whitmore also said you used your HOA authority. I used my front door key, I said sharply. Authority had nothing to do with it. If you came home and found strangers living in your house, what would you do? She hesitated. I'd call the police. Exactly. That's what I did. End of story. The cameraman stopped filming, and Ashley gave me a look that almost bordered on respect. Thank you, Mr. Carter. We'll reach out for a follow-up once we've verified some details. Make sure you verify everything I said. When they left, I locked the door and sat down, my mind spinning. I knew how people like Karen worked. They didn't care about facts. They cared about noise. If she could turn this into a public spectacle, she could manipulate sympathy, twist the story, maybe even raise money off it. I opened my laptop and began building a timeline: flight records, security footage, timestamps, body cam logs from the responding officer's insurance claim receipts. Every piece of evidence that tied me to ownership went into a folder I labeled Whitmore Case. Then I called Margaret again. She's going public, I told her. She's got a lawyer and a TV crew. Margaret whistled. She's escalating fast. You need to go on offense, Noah. Collect everything, emails, texts, anything with her name. I'll have the HOA legal counsel draft a statement backing you up. That was the thing about HOA politics you learned to prepare for war before the first shot was fired. That afternoon, I drove to the Redstone County Police Department to get a copy of the incident report. Officer Alvarez met me in the lobby, her expression equal parts sympathy and disbelief. Carter, you wouldn't believe the call volume we've had since yesterday. She's filed 3 separate complaints already, one for harassment, one for discrimination, and one for property damage. Property damage? Yeah. She claims you destroyed her belongings when you forced her out. The ones she stole from my kitchen, Alvarez shrugged. Welcome to 2025, where people live stream their crimes and still think they're victims. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Any chance you can share her 911 recording? She smiled faintly. Already attached to the report. You'll like the part where she tells dispatch she's being attacked by a man in a Hawaiian shirt. I chuckled despite myself. At least they'll have evidence of my outfit. Before I left, Alvarez leaned closer. Word of advice, get ahead of this. She's not done. People like Lydia, they love drama more than justice. She was right, because that night I received another surprise. At exactly 8:47 p.m., the local Facebook group Maple Creek Chatter exploded. A post from Lydia herself read, "Shocking, my family was illegally evicted from our rental by HOA President Noah Carter. We were victims of racial harassment and false accusations. Please share this story." Within minutes, it had hundreds of comments. Some people defended me, most didn't know what to think. Others, the ones who thrived on gossip, started tagging the local paper. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a neighborhood dispute anymore. This was turning into a reputation war. I spent the next few hours writing a detailed statement, attaching copies of the police report deed and security footage stills. Then I hit post. Almost immediately, comments began flooding in. Unbelievable how far these scammers go. Stay strong, Noah. We've got your back. Typical Karen move. But buried between the supportive comments was one that chilled me. You can delete posts, but we know the truth. You'll pay for what you did. No profile picture, no name, just a threat. The next morning, I found tire marks on my driveway. The same rust-colored van that had been parked across the street was gone. Karen and her family had moved out physically, but they were still living in my head. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to play defense anymore. If Lydia wanted a war, she'd get one. And unlike her, I had something she didn't: proof, connections, and 15 years of HOA experience dealing with entitled people who thought the rules didn't apply to them. It was time to dig deeper. Time to find this so-called Derek Mullins. Because if Karen thought she could rewrite the story of my life, she was about to learn how dangerous it was to underestimate the man who wrote the HOA rulebook. By Monday morning, the entire neighborhood knew. You could feel it in the stairs, neighbors watering their lawns a little longer than usual, pretending not to look as I walked to the mailbox. The HOA group chat was a war zone of emojis and passive-aggressive speculation. Some thought I'd overreacted, others said I'd handled it like a saint. And somewhere in between were the neutral people, those who secretly lived for this kind of drama, sipping their coffee as they watched suburban chaos unfold like a reality show. What none of them realized was that this wasn't over. Far from it. At 9:12 a.m., I got an email from Channel 7 News. The subject line read, "Request for follow-up interview, Lydia Whitmore case." I hadn't even finished my first cup of coffee. Apparently Lydia, sorry Karen, had gone on live television that morning claiming I'd racially targeted a single-mother family and used my position in the HOA to bully hardworking residents. She was standing on the curb outside my house while saying it. My house. On camera. The clip was already trending under the hashtag number HOA harassment. I watched it in disbelief. There she was, hair, perfectly styled makeup, done the very picture of suburban victimhood. She talked about how her children cried all night after being thrown into the cold. She used words like injustice, systemic abuse, privilege. You'd think I'd stormed in wearing riot gear instead of a Hawaiian shirt and khaki shorts. But the worst part wasn't her lies. It was how convincing she looked. Her voice trembled at the right moments. Her eyes glistened on cue, and the comments under the video were eating it up. Disgusting behavior from the HOA. She deserves justice. Another power-hungry landlord exposed. I shut my laptop and stared out the window. The driveway was empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. 10 minutes later, a car pulled up, a gray BMW with tinted windows. A man stepped out in a navy suit carrying a leather briefcase. Bradford Pennington in the flesh. He walked up my porch steps with the smug confidence of someone who's never been told no. "Mr. Carter," he greeted, flashing a too bright smile. "I thought we could discuss this matter in person." I crossed my arms. "You mean the false lawsuit?" He chuckled softly. "Let's not use words like false or frivolous. My client simply wants resolution." "She's suffered significant distress. She broke into my house," I said, "used my stuff, ate my food." Pennington tilted his head. "Allegedly." I clenched my jaw. "You have some nerve showing up here." On the contrary, he said smoothly, I'm offering you a chance to avoid a messy legal battle. If you issue a public apology and pay my client $10,000 for relocation expenses, she's willing to withdraw her complaint. I laughed, an actual bark of disbelief. 10,000. For what emotional trauma from trespassing? He smiled, adjusting his tie. Think of it as a settlement. It's cheaper than defending yourself in court. And far better for your reputation, Mr. HOA President. That last part hit like a dart. He'd done his research. He knew that my position in Maple Creek's HOA meant optics mattered. He was trying to corner me with fear of bad publicity. I leaned forward. You tell your client I don't negotiate with liars, and if she keeps slandering me, I'll file a countersuit for defamation. Bradford's smile faltered just a hair. That would be unfortunate. I'll make sure Mrs. Whitmore is aware of your position. He turned and walked back down the steps, shoes clicking like punctuation marks of arrogance. The moment he drove off, I called my sister Lydia Carter, civil rights attorney, legal bulldog, and the only person I trusted with this kind of madness. She answered on the second ring. Morning, little brother. You sound like you swallowed a cactus. I might have, I muttered. Karen's lawyer just offered me a settlement for kicking her out of my house. Linda snorted. That clown Pennington's a bottom feeder. I've seen his name before 3 sanctions for frivolous lawsuits. Then why is he still practicing? Because the legal system loves paperwork more than justice. But listen, don't engage further. Forward everything to me. I'll handle the response letter. Appreciate it, I said. But this isn't just legal anymore. She's got the media spinning the story. Linda's tone sharpened. Then you fight back with facts. Collect everything, emails, photos, security footage, 911 recordings. Make your timeline airtight, already ahead of her. That afternoon, I compiled every scrap of proof into what I called the Whitmore file. Property deed and tax records. Police report signed by officers Alvarez and Green. Footage from my doorbell camera showing Lydia answering the door when I arrived. Audio clip of her shouting, "We've been here 3 weeks, you can't kick us out." And screenshots of her Facebook posts bragging about finding a place rent-free. By evening, the folder was heavier than a court binder. Around 6 p.m., a familiar voice called from the sidewalk. Noah, you holding up. It was Marcus Reed, my old friend who worked at the city planning office and conveniently owed me a favor from last year's pool permit fiasco. Barely, I said. You hear what's going on, he nodded grimly. Everyone has. Listen, I ran a quick search for you. Lydia Whitmore's address at Oak Terrace. She's got 6 code violations, unpermitted garage conversion, noise complaints, junk vehicles. Real mess. That made me pause. You serious? Marcus grinned. I can email the citations. Might come in handy if she tries to play the model citizen card. Send everything I said. Dinner's on me when this is over. By the time the email landed in my inbox, I had another message waiting from Detective Sarah Williams at Redstone PD. I'd left her a voicemail earlier asking about Derek Mullins, the so-called property manager. Her message was short but explosive. Mullins has priors, fraud, identity theft, and a warrant out of Denver. Looks like your squatter queen may have been working with a professional scammer. I sat back, exhaling slowly. Finally, a crack in their story. I forwarded the info to Linda with a single line, "We're going on offense." That night, Channel 7 ran another segment, but this time it wasn't the sympathy piece Karen had hoped for. Ashley Chang, the reporter who'd interviewed me, had dug deeper. She presented the police report, my documents, and the revelation that Mr. Derek Mullins had an active warrant. Lydia's version suddenly looked flimsy. Still, the damage was done. Her followers doubled down online, spinning new conspiracies that the police were covering up for the HOA, that my documents were AI-generated, even that I was part of a secret government land grab project. If insanity were currency, Karen Whitmore would be a billionaire. Margaret Vu called that night, voice buzzing with adrenaline. Did you see the news? You came off great. Calm, factual. She looked unhinged. Let's hope the rest of Maple Creek saw it the same way. They did, she said. But brace yourself. She's filing a complaint with the regional HOA council claiming you abused your position. I sighed. Of course she is. Margaret hesitated. Noah. I know you want to handle this cleanly, but you should know something. She's got friends in local politics. Her cousin's on the zoning board. Perfect. Just what I needed, connections. I'll deal with it, I said. Thanks for the heads up. After the call, I stepped outside. The night air was cold, crisp, the kind that carries every sound. Across the street, a shape moved inside a parked sedan, the same one that had been there last night. The glow of a cigarette briefly illuminated Ron's face. He was watching again. I considered calling the police, but then another thought struck me. Let him watch. Let them think I was sitting here panicking, while in reality I was building a case that could bury them. Inside, I set up a small folder on my desktop labeled Operation Reclaim. Under it, subfolders for legal filings, media contacts, police correspondence, Whitmore family profiles. It wasn't paranoia anymore, it was strategy. By midnight, my phone buzzed again, an unknown number. This time it was a voicemail. Karen's voice dripping with venom. You think you've won, don't you? You think your fancy job and your little HOA title make you untouchable. But you don't know who you're dealing with, Noah. This is only the beginning. For a long moment, I just stared at the phone. Then I hit save and dragged the file into the evidence folder. Because if she wanted a war, she just declared it on tape. When I finally crawled into bed, exhaustion hit like a freight train. But beneath it was something sharper, a flicker of determination, cold and clean. Karen Whitmore had crossed into my world of bylaws, documentation, and procedure. The place where facts mattered more than feelings. And that was where I was strongest. As I drifted off, I could almost hear her voice echoing through the dark. You don't know who you're dealing with. Oh, but I did. And soon so would everyone else. The next morning, sunlight cut through the blinds like thin blades. I'd barely slept again, not from fear this time, but from calculation. Every word Karen had said, every message, every post was a weapon. And I intended to use them all. I sat at my desk, a fresh cup of coffee steaming beside my laptop, and opened a blank document titled Whitmore Dossier in bold. Beneath it, I typed one simple goal: prove everything. Expose everything. That was how you fought people like Karen Whitmore. Not with anger, not with shouting matches on social media. You buried them under the weight of their own contradictions. By 8:00 a.m., I was already on the phone with Detective Sarah Williams from Redstone PD. Detective, I began. I got your message about Derek Mullins. Tell me you found something useful. Her voice was calm but deliberate. More than useful. Mullins has a rap sheet longer than my grocery list, rental scams, forged documents, wire fraud. He's been running cons like this for years, mostly targeting people on vacation. You're his latest hit. Any chance Lydia Whitmore knew about it? A pause. Let's just say this isn't her first rental misunderstanding. We've had 2 prior reports involving her family. Both dropped when the owners refused to press charges. So this wasn't random, this was her pattern. Can you send me those reports, I asked? I'll see what I can do, she said. Off the record. Next, I called Marcus Reed at the city's Planning and Code Enforcement Office. The guy sounded half asleep when he answered. Marcus, it's Noah. Sorry to call early. I need a favor. Let me guess, something HOA related, he said with a groan. Kind of. You remember Lydia Whitmore, right? Oak Terrace. Marcus chuckled. Oh, I remember. Lady tried to sue the city because her fence felt discriminated against. Yeah, that one, I said. Can you pull up her property record, code violations, permits, whatever you can find? Give me an hour, he replied. He didn't even need that long. 40 minutes later, an email popped into my inbox. Oak Terrace HOA. Violations, Whitmore residents. Reading it was like flipping through a rap sheet for suburban crime. Unpermitted garage conversion into guest unit. 3 citations for junk vehicles in driveway. Noise complaints on 8 separate dates. Illegal bonfire on HOA property. Failure to pay association dues for 9 months. Perfect, I muttered to myself. The self-proclaimed victim of HOA oppression can't even follow her own rules. By noon, I had more data than I knew what to do with. I organized everything into categories: legal, financial, social, behavioral, and started cross-referencing. Every claim she made on social media had a contradiction. For example, her rental agreement story claimed she'd paid Derek Mullins $3,000 via Venmo. Except in one of her public posts, she bragged about being proudly old school and refusing to use online banking. And that TV interview she gave, she said she'd moved in 2 weeks ago. But to Officer Alvarez at the scene, she said 3 weeks. Tiny inconsistency, yes, but in law, inconsistencies were gold. Around 2 p.m., I heard footsteps on my porch. I peeked through the blinds and nearly smiled, Margaret Vu clipboard in hand. HOA badge gleaming like a sheriff's star. She waved through the glass. Open up HOA emergency. I let her in and she scanned the chaos of documents spread across my dining table. Good Lord, Noah, it looks like the FBI's here. I grinned faintly. Close enough. I'm building a dossier. Of course you are, she said. You've always had a type A response to trauma. Hey, it worked for Napoleon. She ignored that. Listen, I talked to Janet Morrison, the HOA president over at Oak Terrace. She's sending me everything she's got on Karen. Turns out, Lydia's filed more than 20 formal complaints against her own neighbors. 20. and half of them accuse people of racial intimidation for things like not inviting her to barbecues. Let me guess, I said. None of them held up. Not one. She lost every case. Margaret's eyes narrowed as she picked up one of my printed screenshots. You really think she's behind the scam with Derek? Either she's in on it, I said, or she's the world's most gullible Karen. At that moment, my phone buzzed again, this time with an incoming call from Ashley Chang, the Channel 7 reporter. Mr. Carter, she said, I wanted to give you a heads up. We received new information about Lydia's so-called property manager. Derek Mullins was arrested in Denver last night on a fraud warrant. My heart kicked. You're sure? Positive. He's in custody. We're running a follow-up story this evening, and I'd love to include your statement if you're willing. Finally, the narrative was turning. Tell your viewers I said that the only thing I'm guilty of is coming home early. Ashley chuckled. Good line. We'll quote you. When I hung up, Margaret grinned. That's it then. She's finished. I shook my head. Not yet. You don't know Karen. She'll double down. They always do. That prediction proved accurate less than 2 hours later. At 5:30 p.m. A new post appeared on Facebook under her account. Breaking. The corrupt HOA is working with the police to silence my family. They're planting false evidence to make us look like criminals. We won't be intimidated. Within minutes, her followers began sharing it. Conspiracy pages picked it up. Suddenly, I was trending again. I could have ignored it, but that wasn't my style. Instead, I attached screenshots of the police report and the Channel 7 article confirming Derek's arrest, then captioned, Truth doesn't need hashtags. It went viral within an hour. Meanwhile, Linda called. Little brother, she said, I've got some news you'll like. I filed preliminary paperwork for a counterclaim defamation, harassment, and fraudulent occupancy. Also, I'm drafting a restraining order against Lydia and her immediate relatives. You work fast, I said. I don't waste time when crazy's involved, she replied. We hung up and I took a long breath. For the first time in weeks, I felt control returning, but Karen wasn't going quietly. That night around 10, my phone buzzed again, unknown number. I hit record before answering. Her voice came through low and venomous. You think you're clever, Noah. You think this is over. You and your little Asian reporter friend. You'll regret humiliating me. Hi, Lydia, I said calmly. Appreciate the voicemail evidence. Keep talking. She froze for a moment, realizing I was recording. Then she hissed, You'll hear from my lawyer, and hung up. Perfect. The next morning, I drove to the Redstone County Courthouse to file the restraining order in person. On my way out, I noticed something odd, a black SUV idling at the corner, tinted windows rolled up. I couldn't see who was inside, but when I turned my head, the vehicle sped off. When I got home, Margaret was already waiting on my porch with a folder in her hands. You're going to love this, she said. Janet from Oak Terrace sent over copies of Karen's written HOA complaints. I flipped through them, each more absurd than the last. One accused a neighbor of hostile energy. Another claimed the HOA discriminated against her because her American flag was too large for jealous board members to handle. And then the piece de resistance complaint, #23, dated 2 years ago. The HOA president, Janet Morrison, used racial intimidation by correcting my grammar in an email. I burst out laughing. She's consistent, I'll give her that. Margaret smiled wryly. You going to add it to your dossier? Every page, I said. When this goes to court, I want the judge to see exactly who we're dealing with. That evening, I sat at my computer compiling everything into one massive PDF. I added timestamps, cross-references, and color-coded sections for clarity. At the top of the document, I wrote, The Whitmore dossier, a comprehensive record of trespass, fraud, and defamation. When I hit save, I sat back in my chair, exhausted but satisfied. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I was ahead of the chaos instead of drowning in it. Outside, the sky, over Maple Creek, glowed faintly orange from the city lights. The neighborhood was quiet again, deceptively peaceful like the calm before a storm. But I knew better. Because women like Karen Whitmore didn't lose gracefully. They regrouped, rebranded, and came back swinging. And somewhere deep down, I could already feel the next move forming in her mind. She'd been humiliated on TV, exposed as a liar tied to a con artist, so what would she do next? Simple. She'd reinvent herself. And when she did, I'd be ready. The next morning began like every other since this nightmare started with my phone buzzing before sunrise. But this time it wasn't another threat or gossip post. It was Detective Sarah Williams, and her tone was sharper than coffee. Noah, she said, we've got him. Got who? Derek Mullins. He was picked up in Denver last night trying to rent out a foreclosed property. Same playbook, fake lease, bogus property manager, act cash deposit through Venmo, vanish before the real owner comes back. I sat up instantly. He confessed, not yet. But when we searched his laptop, guess what we found? Copies of property listings, email threads, and a spreadsheet labeled Client Log. And guess whose name shows up 4 times? Don't tell me, Lydia Whitmore, Sarah confirmed. 2 of the entries list her as a coordinator. That was it, the smoking gun. Karen hadn't just been a victim, she'd been working with the scammer. Sarah, I said, my voice hardening, please tell me that's admissible. If it checks out, absolutely, she said. But keep this quiet for now. We're verifying bank transfers between them. It looks like they split deposits from multiple rental victims. I hung up heart-pounding with a strange mix of fury and satisfaction. The walls of her little fantasy were finally starting to crumble. But even as I exhaled, my phone buzzed again, this time a notification from Channel 7 News. The headline nearly made me choke on my breath. Exclusive: Lydia Whitmore denies fraud allegations, claims police cover-up. Unbelievable. She was still talking. The video showed her standing outside Oak Terrace HOA clutching a folder of evidence. This is bigger than me, she declared dramatically to the camera. This is about systemic corruption, powerful people using HOAs to silence honest citizens. Her voice cracked on cue eyes, moist nails immaculate. Honest citizen, I muttered, who just happens to have her name in a con artist client log. I called Ashley Chang, the reporter who'd run the earlier story. Ashley, you're not going to believe this. Detective Williams just told me Lydia's linked to Derek through bank transfers. You have to run that. Ashley hesitated. I can't yet. Until it's verified by the department, I can't publish it. But if you have proof, give me 12 hours, I said. You'll have more than proof. And that was the start of what I now call the longest day of my life. By 9 a.m., I was at my office, technically the HOA administrative suite inside Maple Creek's community center, but I like to call it my war room. I spread out files, printed screenshots, and police correspondence across the conference table like a general planning an invasion. Marcus Reed from the planning office arrived first, carrying a thick folder. Morning, General. Report, I said, half joking. He dropped the folder with a grin. All the violations from Oak Terrace, plus some extra goodies. Turns out Lydia's husband Ron has been running an unlicensed auto repair business out of their garage for 2 years. Noise complaints, oil disposal violations, the works. Beautiful, I said, flipping through the pages. That's motive. Financial desperation. They needed cash. Derek had a scam. Lydia had the fake respectability. Next came Janet Morrison, president of Oak Terrace HOA herself, carrying her own binder. She looked exhausted, the way only someone who'd spent years dealing with Karen could. I don't know how you've lasted this long, Janet said, dropping into a chair. She nearly drove our HOA to bankruptcy with legal complaints. I raised an eyebrow. Legal complaints, 27 in total, Janet said, all dismissed, all targeting board members. She accused us of everything from racial bias to conspiracy with the mayor's office. Last year she tried to sue a landscaper for mowing her lawn too aggressively. I almost laughed. Sounds about right. Here's the kicker, Janet added, sliding a file across the table. I found out last year that she and Derek were cousins by marriage. They claimed to meet through real estate, but his name was on her HOA emergency contact form 2 years ago. That stopped me cold. So this connection isn't new. Not even close, Janet said grimly. My gut says they've been doing this scam for a while, using vacant or high-value properties. You weren't their first, just their unluckiest. Not unluckiest, I corrected, just the wrong target. By afternoon, the pieces were fitting together. I called Detective Williams again. Sarah, we've got documentation showing Lydia's family connection to Derek and her past HOA disputes. Can you cross-check that with his email metadata already on it, she said. Also, we found something else. You're going to love this. She paused for effect. A scanned fake lease agreement for your house, dated 3 days before you left for Hawaii. Signed, get this by you. Except the signature is forged. I nearly dropped the phone. That's felony-level fraud. Exactly, she said. We'll be adding forgery and identity theft to the case. I could barely contain my grin. Sarah, you just made my week. Meanwhile, Linda, my sister, the lawyer, was already strategizing. She set up a Zoom call that night with me, Margaret, and Detective Williams to outline the legal offensive. First step, Linda said, is filing an amended civil suit for damages. Will include property destruction, emotional distress, and defamation. Second step, petition the court for a temporary restraining order against Lydia and Ron. Third step, once the fraud charges are filed, we'll push for restitution. Margaret leaned in toward the webcam. You're going full nuclear. Linda smiled like a shark. Oh, this isn't nuclear. This is preemptive justice. We laughed, but behind the humor there was a shared exhaustion. Weeks of being slandered, stalked, and gaslit by the Whitmores had worn us down. But now, finally, we had the leverage. At 6 p.m., Ashley called again. Her voice was tense. "Okay, Noah, the story's confirmed. Police verified Derek's connection to Lydia. We're going live at 8. You want to give a statement? You bet I do." At 8:03 p.m., the broadcast began. Ashley stood in front of the Maple Creek sign microphone in hand wind whipping through her hair. In a shocking twist, Channel 7 has obtained documents linking Lydia Whitmore, the woman who claimed she was illegally evicted from HOA President Noah Carter's home, to a known real estate scammer Derek Mullins, who was arrested yesterday on multiple counts of fraud. Records show financial transfers between Mullins and Whitmore, suggesting possible collusion. The camera cut to me standing on my porch, calm and deliberate. "All I ever wanted was to come home," I said. But when someone weaponizes lies to manipulate sympathy, the truth becomes the only defense. I trust the system to do its job. Simple, factual, devastating. By the next morning, the internet had turned. The same people who once called me a racist HOA tyrant were now flooding Lydia's posts with snake emojis and clown gifs. Her account went private by noon. But victory didn't come without collateral damage. Around lunchtime, Marcus called again. "Heads up, some of her family's neighbors at Oak Terrace are getting harassed. Reporters everywhere. She's claiming you leaked her address." I pinched the bridge of my nose. I didn't, but she's going to spin it that way. "Want me to confirm the city won't release any private info?" Marcus asked. "Do it," I said. "We keep this clean. She dirties her own name just fine." Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was brewing. People like Karen didn't fade quietly, they reinvented. And sure enough, 2 nights later, she appeared again, this time not on Facebook, but in a YouTube live stream titled "The Truth About HOA Tyranny." There she was, seated in front of an American flag backdrop, talking about corrupt elites, land grab conspiracies, and weaponized HOAs. She'd gathered nearly 10,000 viewers, angry people who loved a villain, as long as they could pretend she wasn't one. But this time, I didn't panic. I hit record. Every lie, every accusation, every unhinged conspiracy went straight into the Whitmore dossier under a new section labeled Public Defamation Evidence. She wanted attention. She'd get it on the courtroom projector. Late that night, as I sat in the quiet glow of my desk lamp, I received a new email from Detective Williams. Subject confidential. Financial verification Noah. It's official. We've confirmed 5 payments from Derek's Venmo to Lydia's account totaling $14,700. She's listed as consulting. Charges are being expanded to include conspiracy to commit fraud. You'll be notified when we move to arrest. I exhaled slowly, staring at the screen. Months of chaos, threats, humiliation, and finally tangible justice. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the framed photo of my house from the day I'd bought it. Back then, it was just a dream, a place of peace. Now, it had become a battlefield. But the war was shifting, and for the first time, it wasn't me under siege, it was her. The morning after Channel 7 aired the exposé, Maple Creek Reserve woke up to chaos of a very different kind. For once, I wasn't the villain. The local forums were on fire, and every HOA president in the Tri-County area seemed to have joined the conversation. My phone was vibrating nonstop. Notifications, calls, voicemails, it was like Judgment Day for every Karen in a 50-mile radius. By 7:30 a.m., the neighborhood Facebook group had already rebranded the trending tag from number HOA harassment to number Karengate. The irony was poetic. So she was in on the scam the whole time. Can't believe I defended her. Of course, Karen had a cousin in real estate fraud. Classic. And buried beneath the laughter were the first real signs of public sympathy for me. At 9 a.m., I got the call I'd been waiting for. Detective Sarah Williams again. "We've officially charged Lydia Whitmore with conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and defamation," she said, her tone both professional and quietly triumphant. Derek's confession confirms she helped identify targets, vacant homes, especially ones with high HOA value. So I wasn't just unlucky. Not even close. You were marked number 6. That number sent a chill through me. "Sarah, what happens now? Denver PD and our office are coordinating extradition on Derek. Lydia's being asked to surrender voluntarily. If she doesn't, we'll issue a warrant by Monday." And the civil side, "Talk to your sister. But Noah, you did everything right. If you hadn't kept records, this would have gone very differently." "I'm an HOA president," I said dryly. "Documentation is my love language." She laughed. "Remind me never to live in your neighborhood." At 1045, Channel 7 aired the follow-up segment live. Ashley Chang's face filled the screen. New developments this morning in the viral HOA dispute. Sources confirm that Lydia Whitmore, the woman who accused HOA President Noah Carter of discrimination, is now a suspect in a multi-state rental fraud ring. Investigators say she worked with arrested scammer Derek Mullins to target homeowners on vacation. They played clips from my earlier interview spliced against Derek's mugshot and Lydia's social media rants. It wasn't just vindication, it was demolition. Ashley's tone softened at the end. Mr. Carter declined to comment today, but told us, quote, "Truth doesn't expire." That line hit harder than I expected. But not everyone took the truth gracefully. At 1 p.m., my assistant HOA manager, Martha Dunn, barged into the community office, clutching her tablet. "Noah, you've got to see this." She turned the screen toward me. It was a live stream, Karen broadcasting again, eyes red, voice trembling, theatrically. They're framing me. The HOA, the cops, the media, they're all connected. They want to silence people like me who speak out against abuse of power. Behind her, someone whispered something off camera, and she snapped. "Shut up, Ron," before forcing a smile. "They think they can destroy my life. I'll fight back. I'll run for city council if I have to. The truth will come out." I pinched the bridge of my nose. Of course she's doubling down. Denial is her cardio. Martha shook her head. The comment section's a war zone again. I glanced at the scrolling feed. Some viewers still defended her crying media bias. Others mocked her mercilessly. But one comment froze my blood. "Just wait until Friday. They'll regret this." I stared at the username Tyler W. Arrow 10. That was her teenage son. By late afternoon, everything accelerated. The Oak Terrace HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to suspend Lydia's membership rights pending investigation. The city code office reopened her pending violations, and in a move that was both symbolic and brutal, the bank issued a notice of foreclosure on the Whitmore residence due to 8 months of unpaid mortgage. It was poetic justice, too poetic almost, but the victory was messy. That night, a local paper ran a story headlined, "From HOA Feud to Fraud Ring, the Lydia Whitmore Scandal." The photo beneath was of her walking out of her house, with cameras flashing, Ron trailing behind, carrying a cardboard box labeled Family Photos. The comments were merciless. "Guess karma's an HOA rule too. She should have stuck to complaining about lawns. Can we nominate Noah for President of Earth?" I wanted to enjoy it. God, I did. But something about the image unsettled me. Her face, angry, humiliated, broken, didn't look like a villain's anymore. It looked like someone who'd lost everything and didn't know what to do next. That sympathy evaporated at exactly 8:17 p.m. when my security system pinged a motion alert. The front camera showed Ron Whitmore standing at the edge of my driveway. He wasn't armed, but his stance was aggressive, hands in fists, jaw tight. I called 911 before even opening the door. By the time 2 patrol cars arrived, Ron was gone. But they found fresh footprints near the gate and a half-empty beer can in my flower bed. Officer Alvarez, the same one from that first day, shook her head. "He's spiraling, Noah. We'll put extra patrols around your property tonight." I nodded, trying to keep my composure. "He thinks I ruined their lives." "Did you?" she asked quietly. I looked out toward the dark street, the empty sedan that used to park across from my house now replaced by silence. "No," I said. "They did that themselves." Still, guilt has a funny way of disguising itself as exhaustion. The following morning, my sister Linda showed up at my door, wearing a power suit and holding a thick binder. "Get dressed," she said. "We've got a court appearance." What, already there? Trying to file an injunction to stop the fraud charges. We're going to shut it down. By 10 a.m., we were standing in Redstone County Superior Court. Across the aisle, Lydia sat with her lawyer, Bradford Pennington, the man who'd tried to shake me down weeks ago. He looked less smug now, sweat shining on his forehead. The hearing was brief, but brutal. Linda was surgical. "Your Honor," she began the defense claims, "my client illegally evicted Mrs. Whitmore. Yet Exhibit A, the property deed, shows he is the sole owner. Exhibit B, police body cam footage, confirms officers verified that ownership. Exhibit C, bank records demonstrate financial transactions between Mrs. Whitmore and known con artist Derek Mullins." Pennington tried to object, but the judge cut him off. "Counselor, I've seen enough. The injunction is denied. Proceed with the fraud case." The gavel struck sharp as thunder. Lydia's face crumpled. For the first time, she looked small, truly small. Her eyes darted toward me, full of something that wasn't anger anymore. It was desperation. When the hearing ended, I turned to leave, but she called after me. "You think this makes you the hero," she said, voice trembling. "You humiliated me. You ruined my family. You'll regret it." I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. Back home, the victory felt hollow. I sat on my porch with a glass of the same scotch Ron had stolen, weeks before, now reclaimed, and watched the sunset bleed across the Colorado hills. Margaret stopped by with takeout. "You should celebrate," she said. "You won." "Did I?" I asked. "Because it feels like I just survived something that never should have happened in the first place." She sat beside me, opening a carton of noodles. "You didn't start it, but you finished it." "Yeah," I said quietly. "And that's the problem with finishing things. You still have to live with the ending." We sat in silence for a while, listening to cicadas buzz and sprinklers hiss across perfect lawns. The neighborhood looked peaceful again. Too peaceful. Then my phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. "Enjoy the calm, HOA boy. You have no idea what's coming." No signature, no need for one. I knew that tone. Karen wasn't done. At 1:14 p.m., the last story of the night aired. Fraud ring collapses as charges mount against Whitmore family. The footage showed police lights outside their Oak Terrace home boxes being loaded into patrol cars. Derek was in handcuffs. Lydia wasn't visible. Ashley's closing line echoed through my living room. Justice, it seems, has finally come home to Maple Creek. I turned off the TV set, down my glass, and locked every door. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, low rolling and far too familiar. Maybe it was just weather, or maybe it was the sound of another storm on the horizon. It had been 3 quiet weeks. Too quiet. Maple Creek was starting to feel like Maple Creek again, lawns trimmed, sprinklers hissing, the faint smell of weekend barbecues floating through the air. The neighbors who once avoided me now waved. Some even stopped to chat, offering apologies or awkward half-smiles. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. But peace in a neighborhood like ours is an illusion, a freshly painted fence hiding cracks beneath the wood. And if there's one thing I've learned about women like Lydia Whitmore, it's that they never disappear. They regroup, they plot, and then they strike where you least expect it. The first sign came on a Wednesday morning. I was halfway through my coffee when Margaret called, her voice tense. "Noah, you're not going to like this. I rarely do." "What's up?" Channel 7 just ran a teaser for a documentary special, Suburban Justice: The Truth Behind HOA Power Abuse. Guess who's one of the featured voices? My mug froze midair. "You're kidding. I wish I was." They're painting her as a whistleblower. Apparently she's sharing her side to expose systemic corruption in HOA communities. I set the cup down so hard it clattered. "You've got to be kidding me." "She's under investigation for fraud. Public sympathy doesn't care about indictments," Margaret said grimly. "And she's smart enough to know it." Smart. That word tasted wrong when associated with Lydia. But in her own twisted way, she was clever, weaponizing public opinion like a scalpel. I turned on the TV. There she was, framed by soft lighting and somber music, speaking directly into the camera. Her hair was darker now, her style more reformed activist than suburban menace. "All I ever wanted," she said tearfully, "was a safe home for my kids. But powerful people decided to destroy that. I was framed, bullied, and silenced by those who think rules don't apply to them." A montage followed, selectively edited footage of police cars, HOA meetings, even shots of me talking to reporters. The narration called me a symbol of unchecked HOA authority. Then, the kicker. "When homeowners fight back," she said, voice trembling, "they're labeled Karens." But who's really abusing power here? The screen faded to black and the network logo appeared, "Coming this Friday." I stared at it in disbelief. "She just rebranded herself," I muttered. "From fraud suspect to folk hero." By noon, my inbox was full of hate mail again. Some from random viewers. Some from people in other states who'd seen the promo and decided I was the devil incarnate. "You should be ashamed." "How much did you pay the cops? Fascist power corrupts and you're the proof." Linda called around 3, her voice sharp and composed as always. I saw the promo. "We're sending a cease and desist to the network by tomorrow. But Noah, brace yourself. She's going public again." "I can handle public," I said. "It's the lies that wear you down. Then we'll bury them in truth." That night I went for a drive, something I hadn't done since before the whole ordeal. The quiet hum of the car, the familiar streetlights flickering by the curve of Maple Creek Road, it should have been comforting. But every shadow looked like a threat, every parked car, a surveillance van. As I passed the old Oak Terrace subdivision, I slowed down instinctively. Her house foreclosed, boarded up, sat at the end of the cul-de-sac like a tombstone of bad decisions. The for sale sign tilted slightly in the wind. But what made me hit the brakes was the flicker of light inside. A shadow moved behind the boarded window. My pulse spiked. For a long minute, I just sat there, headlights off, staring. Then the shadow vanished. Maybe it was squatters. Maybe it was nothing. But the uneasy feeling followed me all the way home. The next day, things escalated. At 7 a.m., Margaret burst into my office. "Noah, we've got a situation." "What now?" She dropped a stack of printed papers on my desk. "Someone filed a petition with the Regional HOA Oversight Committee, an official grievance against you. It accuses you of harassment, discrimination, and misuse of HOA funds." I blinked. "Filed by who?" She didn't answer, just pointed to the signature line. "Lydia M. Whitmore." "She can't legally do that," I said, standing up. "She's suspended from Oak Terrace. She filed it as a citizen grievance, not a homeowner," one Margaret explained. "She's exploiting a loophole. The committee has to review it." I leaned back in my chair, jaw tight. "She's not trying to win. She's trying to drain me money, energy, credibility." Margaret nodded grimly. "She's playing the long game." By Friday, the documentary aired. I watched it alone, lights off, just to see what narrative she'd spun. It was worse than I'd imagined. They interviewed experts who spoke about HOA corruption. They showed edited clips of my statements cut mid-sentence to sound authoritarian. They even found one angry ex-member who called me controlling. And then came the finale, a slow-motion shot of Lydia walking along a sidewalk looking somber, as the narrator said. For some, homeownership has become a battleground, and the real victims are those brave enough to stand up to power. A violin swelled. The screen faded to her voice whispering, "They took my home, but they'll never take my truth." It was cinematic, manipulative, and infuriatingly effective. Within hours, number Justice for Lydia was trending. Saturday morning brought the breaking point. Detective Williams called again, but this time her tone was different, urgent. "Noah, we have a problem. Someone vandalized the Redstone Police evidence locker last night." Guess which case files were targeted? I felt cold. No. Yes. The Mullins-Whitmore folder. Someone tried to delete video evidence too. Luckily, we have backups, but... She sighed. "This complicates everything. The DA won't move forward until digital forensics finishes restoring it. So she's buying time," I said bitterly. Or someone's buying it for her. By Sunday, the harassment was back in full swing. Anonymous mail, fake HOA complaints, even phone calls with nothing but breathing on the other end. It was psychological warfare, and she was winning the noise battle. I recorded everything. Every call, every letter. But that night, as I sat cataloging evidence, something caught my eye outside a figure across the street. A woman in a hooded jacket standing perfectly still, just watching my house. I grabbed my phone, zoomed in through the camera. The streetlight flickered just enough to reveal her face. Lydia. I froze. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't yelling, she was just watching. And then she raised her phone, snapping a picture of my window before turning and walking away into the dark. I called 911, but by the time the patrol car arrived, she was gone. Monday morning, Linda's office called with mixed news. Good news, our restraining orders approved. Bad news, the network's lawyers claim journalistic privilege. We can't force them to retract the documentary yet. I sighed. So we fight fire with fire. What do you mean? I said, opening my laptop, if she wants a war of perception, she'll get one. I spent the next 6 hours drafting my own HOA statement, video factual, and calm but devastatingly detailed. I listed the fraud evidence, police reports, and even her forged lease, all cross-referenced with public records. At 6 p.m., I hit upload. This isn't about HOAs. It's about accountability, I said into the camera. You can edit the truth, but you can't erase it. Within hours, it hit 5,000,000 views. And for the first time since this all began, the tide didn't just turn. It roared back. The next morning, Ashley Chang messaged me personally. Network just pulled the documentary from their site. Legal review pending. You might have just ended her career. I leaned back, exhaustion flooding my body. Outside, the neighborhood looked peaceful again, the lawns perfect, the fences straight, the sun bright. But I knew better. Some wars don't end with arrests or news headlines. They end in silence, when the enemy finally realizes you won't break. Still, as I looked across the street at that empty spot where she'd stood, I couldn't help but wonder, was this silence, peace, or just the pause before her next move? The restraining order might have been signed, sealed, and stamped by a judge, but a woman like Lydia Whitmore never respected ink on paper. 2 weeks after my statement video went viral, and the network pulled her documentary, I woke up to something far worse than online drama. Spray painted across my garage door in thick red letters were the words HOA Devil. The paint dripped down like blood. The concrete was littered with torn flyers of her face cut up, defaced, scrawled with my name in black marker. It wasn't vandalism. It was a message. The kind that said I'm still here. I called the police immediately. Detective Sarah Williams arrived within 30 minutes, clipboard in hand, eyes hard. "Looks like we've got her signature style again," she said, snapping photos. "Any witnesses, neighbors didn't see a thing," I said. But my doorbell cam caught a car pulling up at 214A. "M, black SUV, no plates visible," she exhaled sharply. "That matches the description from the Oak Terrace break-in last month. Someone broke into her old house again, probably her or Ron." "So she's circling back," I said quietly. Sarah nodded. "She's spiraling. Her accounts are frozen, her lawyer dropped her, and her cousin Derek took a plea deal. She's got nothing left but rage." "Then she's dangerous," I said flatly. Sarah met my eyes. She always was. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every car that passed made me tense. At one point I caught myself clutching a flashlight like a weapon. By morning I'd made a decision. I was done playing defense. I called Linda, my sister, first thing. "It's time to finish this." She didn't ask what I meant. "The trial's in 2 days," she said. "We'll present the full dossier. Derek's testimony should bury her." "Good," I said, "because I want her lies to be in daylight." The courthouse was packed on Thursday morning. Reporters lined the steps, cameras flashing as I walked up beside Linda. The air was electric, the kind of tension that builds before a storm breaks. Inside, Lydia sat at the defense table in a muted gray suit. Her hair was pinned back, her face pale but calm. Ron was nowhere to be seen. She didn't look at me when I entered. The prosecutor opened with precision. "Your Honor, this is not a case of misunderstanding. This is a pattern of fraud, deceit, and manipulation. The defendant knowingly participated in an organized scheme to occupy and profit from properties she did not own." Then came the evidence, photos, financial records, Derek's confession video, and my own recordings. When they played the audio clip of her calling me, threatening me, "You think you've won HOA, boy," the courtroom went silent. Lydia didn't flinch. When it was her turn, she took the stand with the same smooth confidence she'd wielded in her documentary interviews. "I was deceived," she said softly, eyes glistening. "I trusted Derek. I thought it was a legitimate rental. I never meant to hurt anyone." Linda rose, slowly approaching with surgical calm. "Mrs. Whitmore, is this your signature on the forged lease document? I don't remember. And are these your Venmo transactions labeled consulting fees from Mr. Mullins?" She hesitated. "I was helping him find homes. I didn't know he was lying." Linda's eyes narrowed. "And when you spray-painted Mr. Carter's property, did you also think that was helping him?" The room buzzed. Lydia's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Linda stepped closer, voice steady but sharp. "You accused my client of racism, harassment, and abuse of power. You went on national television, called him a corrupt tyrant, and lied about everything. So tell this court, Mrs. Whitmore, who's the real bully here?" The silence was deafening. Lydia's composure cracked just slightly, a twitch in her eye, a tightening of her mouth. When she finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. "He ruined my life." Linda straightened. "No, Mrs. Whitmore, you ruined your own." The judge called for a recess, but everyone in that courtroom knew the verdict before it was spoken. 2 days later, the news hit everywhere. Former HOA homeowner sentenced for property fraud and defamation. Whitmore pleads guilty to conspiracy charges. She took a plea deal, 6 months in county jail, 3 years probation, mandatory psychiatric counseling. Derek got longer. Ron disappeared entirely. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, what I felt was empty. When I left the courthouse, reporters swarmed me. Microphones thrust forward, questions flying. "Mr. Carter, do you think justice was served? What would you say to Mrs. Whitmore if she were here right now?" I paused, then said quietly I'd tell her I hope she finds peace. Because I finally did, and then I walked away. Life, after Lydia, felt different, quieter. The HOA board meetings returned to mundane arguments about paint colors and fence heights. People waved without suspicion again. Even the air felt lighter. But sometimes late at night I'd catch glimpses of the old fear, the hum of paranoia that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't done. One evening I got home from a meeting and noticed something tucked under my doormat. A folded letter, handwritten, no return address. I hesitated, then opened it. Noah, you were right. About everything. About Derek, about me. I let anger destroy the life I was trying to protect. But I'm done fighting. The truth finally caught up, and maybe that's the only justice that matters. Tell your sister she's good. Too good. L. For a moment, I didn't know whether to feel relief or pity. I folded the letter carefully and slid it into the last page of my old Whitmore dossier, sealing the chapter for good. Weeks turned into months. Then one afternoon in early spring, Ashley Chang called. Noah, she said, I wanted to let you know we're doing a follow-up special. The fallout of Karen Gate. You're in it, but this time, as the example of how truth survives chaos. I laughed softly. That's a first, she chuckled. You've become the unofficial face of HOA redemption. You might even like it, maybe, I said, as long as they spell my name right this time. That night, I hosted a small barbecue in my backyard, the same yard that once looked like a crime scene. The grill hissed, laughter filled the air, and for the first time, it didn't feel forced. Margaret clinked her glass against mine. So what's next, Mr. HOA President? I smiled. Nothing dramatic, I hope. Maybe just a vacation. Somewhere without neighbors. We laughed, and for a while, everything was perfect. But as the sun dipped behind the mountains, I looked out across the street at the empty lot where Lydia's car used to park. For a split second, I thought I saw a silhouette, a woman standing by the fence watching. Then the motion light flicked on, and there was nothing there. Maybe it was just memory, maybe not. But either way, I didn't feel fear this time. Only understanding. Because the truth about people like Lydia Whitmore is that they never really vanish. They linger like echoes, reminders of how fragile decency can be when pride and anger take over. Still, as I closed the door that night, I whispered to myself, half a prayer, half a warning. The rules matter, even when no one's watching. In a world where everyone wants to be right, it's easy to forget that being decent matters more. Lydia's story, our story, wasn't just about laws or HOAs or who owned what. It was about what happens when ego replaces empathy, when people weaponize victimhood to excuse their own wrongdoing. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, a sigh of relief, a clean morning, a house finally at peace. If you've ever dealt with your own Karen, you know the truth. Fighting them changes you. The trick is not letting them define you. So wherever you're watching from, remember, document everything, stand your ground, and never let someone rewrite your story. And if you enjoyed this one, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because somewhere out there, another HOA story is just beginning,